right, so our first question. A neighbor is using land which they do not own. A neighbor is using land which they do not own. Is this called escheat, variance, subordination, or encroachment? What do you guys think this would be? Which one is when the neighbor is using land that they do not own? All right, so of course this is called an encroachment, right? Now, how would I know if my neighbor's land is encroaching on mine? How would I know if my neighbor's land is encroaching on mine? What would I look for? How would I figure that out? And the way that I would figure that out is I would order a survey, right? If I order a survey, it's going to show me where the lot lines are on my property. It's going to tell me if anybody's like built their shed on my property line, that sort of thing. And if they have, then that would be called an encroachment. All right, next question. A condensed history of a title to a particular piece of real estate, including a summary of the original grant and all of the subsequent conveyances and encumbrances affecting the property. A condensed history. Is this the certificate of title, the chain of title, the evidence of title, or the abstract of title? So notice what they say here. It's not just conveyances, because if it was just conveyances, then we would pick chain of title, right? It's not just conveyances. So, because conveyances from one person to the next would be recorded in the chain of title. So what do we know about this? We know that the abstract of title is the way that they would be able to see encumbrances. Now, what are some encumbrances when we do a title search that might show up? Maybe a lien on the property would be a good example, right? If we had a lien on our property, we would have an encumbrance. If we had, let's see, an easement, that would show up if there was a recorded easement. So the abstract of title is more broad. It includes the chain of title, but the chain of title by itself just has to do with conveyances. Okay. So next question. Where property is owned by more than one person. Where property is owned by more than one person. And if you guys have any real estate exam questions that you want to ask, just put it in the chat. I'm doing this live right now. I'll be glad to answer any exam prep questions that you guys have. So where property is owned by more than one person, is that called a concurrent estate, ownership and severalty, dual estate, or dual ownership? So more than one person owns this property. Is it concurrent estate, ownership and severalty, dual estate, or dual ownership? Now, if it was one person, we know that it would be ownership and severalty, right? Because if we're by ourselves, it's ownership and severalty. All right. So in this case, we would call it a concurrent estate. It's two people owning it, or two or more people owning it at the same time. This is a form of co-ownership. What are some of our concurrent estates that we can think of? Ways that we could own property with more than one person. One of them would be joint tenancy. Don't forget joint tenancy. One of them would be, hey Vivian. One of them would be joint tenancy. One would be tenants in common. Another one would be tenants in common, right? All right, Vivian, you're going to practice along with me. I'm glad to see you're here. That's awesome. So I don't have to answer these on my own. All right. So one who grants property or property rights. Is it a grantee, a grantee, I guess, a grantor, or a grantus? One who grants property or property rights. Who's the one giving the deed to someone else? What do you guys think? You know this one? The grantor, right? The one who grants the deed to the other person. The grantee would be the one receiving the deed, right? The grantee. Who would sign the deed? Does anybody remember who would sign the deed? If we were going to be transferring property from one person to the next, who would sign the deed? The grantor would sign it, right? And when they deliver the deed to the grantee and they accept it, then the title transfer occurs, right? Not until there's delivery and acceptance. All right, next question. Property that is generally considered to be movable. Is it, I'm not even sure how to say this, ibid santorum? I don't know the meaning of that one. Sorry, guys. Ad valorem, personal property, or real property? Property that is generally considered movable. Ibid santorum, ad valorem, personal property, or real property? What do you guys think? It's considered movable. It would be personal property, right? Now, what's that word? I know it's not the answer to this question, but what does the word ad valorem mean? If we're talking about something that's ad valorem, what do we mean by that? So ad valorem is according to value. So like if Vivian's my next door neighbor and her property is worth 450,000 and mine is worth 400,000, Vivian's going to pay more in property taxes if if the property is taxed according to value, right? That's ad valorem taxes. Yeah. All right, next question. Oh, it's kind of slowing down here a little bit. Sorry, guys. When the loan payments do not cover the principal and or interest on the loan, this causes the loan balance to increase. When the loan payments do not cover the principal and or interest on the loan, this causes the loan balance to increase. Is this full amortization, straight note, conversion, or negative amortization? Full amortization, straight note, conversion, or negative amortization? All right. So the answer to this one is yes. Very good, Vivian. Negative amortization, right? We're kind of we're paying interest on interest, just like a credit card. Remember, a real estate mortgage should be simple interest. It should not compound on itself. What I mean by that is every month my payment should cover at least my interest that's due on the loan. And in some cases, my principal too, part of my principal too. If the payment that's set up is not enough to cover that monthly interest that the loan is accruing, then it would compound and it would keep growing and we would be paying interest on interest and we would never get the house paid off. And that's, or not for a very long time, right? That's negative amortization. All right, next question. The value normally used by tax assessors for tax purposes, is it the assessed value, the formal value, the appraised value, or the intrinsic value? The assessed value, the formal value, the appraised value, or intrinsic value. This one might be a little too easy because it kind of says it in the name. But remember, the tax assessors are trying to determine how much property tax to charge us, and they would use the assessed value, right? They would use the assessed value. All right, awesome. All right, next question. A contract which may be either affirmed or rejected at the option of one of the parties. Is it impounded, voidable, void, or exemplary? Vivian, you're getting every single one of these right. That's awesome. You've been studying so hard. A contract which may be either affirmed or rejected at the option of one of the parties. Which one would it be? And that would be voidable. Voidable. So an example of a voidable contract would be like if I went to Vivian's house and I said, sign this or else I'm going to lock you in the closet or something like that. So it's kind of crazy, right? She might sign it, but she's done it under duress. So she could possibly go to a judge and get out of it later. That's voidable. All right. Let's do a couple more. All right, next one. Records of all prior transfers for a particular parcel of land. Is it chain of title, abstract of title, deed, or title insurance? Chain of title, abstract of title, deed, or title insurance. Records of all prior transfers for a particular piece of land or parcel of land. We kind of talked about title this kind of a little bit earlier. So do you guys remember the records of all prior transfers for a particular parcel of land? The abstracted title is the broader one. This is narrow. What do we call this one? Remember this one? This is chain of title, right? The chain of title. Because it's like the conveyance. Very good, you got it. It's like the conveyance from one person to the next, right? It goes from one person to the next. So Sally sold it to Betty. Betty sold it to Bob. Bob sold it to Sam. We follow that chain along. And if we have a gap in the chain, do you remember what we call that? If there's a gap in the chain, it's a broken chain, we would have a problem. We would call it, anybody know? Anybody know? The cloud on the title, right? The cloud on the title. Yeah, awesome. All right. Next question. The estimating of value of property for tax purposes. The estimating of value of property for tax purposes. Now they're just re-asking us a question that we saw a minute ago. Remember what this one is called? They're looking at it for tax purposes. What would this one be? Give you guys a second to think about it. There's a little bit of lag on the live, so it would be the assessment, right? It would be the assessment. And remember what it means when we have a novation, when I replace one contract that's old for a new contract, that's novation. Or if I take one person in the contract and swap them out for a new person in the contract, that's novation. Novel, right? It's expanding, right? It's switching one out for the other. What about hypothecation, which is one of my all-time favorite words for real estate vocab, because I think it's just like a cool sounding word, like hypothecation. It's very, very serious sounding. So the example I use for hypothecation is like, if I went to a pawn shop and I pawned a diamond ring and I took out a loan, they would tell me that I had to leave the ring there until I paid off the loan. But if I bought a house, they wouldn't tell me, come back in 30 years when the house is paid off and we'll give you the keys to the house. Or if I bought a car, they wouldn't say, come back in 5 years when you've paid off this car and we'll give you the keys to the car. It doesn't make sense, right? So in those kinds of big ticket item loans like that, they use hypothecation. Basically, they're saying you can use, you're hypothecating, you're pledging the collateral that you're borrowing, you're pledging the property that you're borrowing the money for to buy as collateral. You can use it while you're paying on it, but you better keep paying on it. So if you stop paying on it and you just give up all of a sudden, then they're going to come and repo it, right? That's hypothecation. All right, let's do one more tonight. So which one of these serves as evidence of the debt? Is it the promissory notes, the deed, the title, or the mortgages? And remember, the promissory note is when I make my pledge to pay back the money, right? I'm promising what I'm going to pay. It's the paperwork that I sign in order to borrow this money. I'm promising what I'm going to pay back, right? Promissory notes versus mortgages, deeds, and titles. Deed is the paper that shows that I own a property, right? Title is the concept that I own the property. It's like, it's not paper. It's not the paper. Paper's the deed. But if I have the deed to a house, I have title. I have ownership. And mortgages are also part of that mix. So the promissory note is my promise to repay the loan. Don't forget, that's my promise to repay the loan, okay? And it's the evidence of the debt that I've taken out to buy this house. Now, if you guys like this tonight, if it helps you to study a little bit, be sure to follow and like and subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to try to do lives like this more often for everybody to kind of get some interaction with some folks. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm Maria Center from Prep Agent, and I will see you all soon. Thanks for studying with me.